Hello, my name is Martha Pineda. I am the hostess of Onlibrary Studio, a space where we share what we learned from business, marketing, and professional development books. And we do this because we'd like to spark ideas and collaborations. And that is actually the reason why I'm doing this segment in English. This is the very first one I do in this fashion. And I started a library studio back in May 2020. To date, I have had over 20 guests presenting different books. And since I'm rescheduling some of their participations, I thought I'd take an opportunity to present a book myself, as well as to take the opportunity to invite you, if you are interested in presenting what you learned from a business marketing or professional development book. I'd be delighted to hear about you. And well, without further ado, let me tell you what I'm going to be doing today. I will be speaking about this book, which is the Zen and Creative Management by Albert Lowe. This is a book that I got several years ago while I was still living in Monterrey, Mexico, and I thought it was very interesting, not only because it was published in 1976, but because I thought it'd be interesting to know what was going through the minds of managers back in that time. And I kind of wanted to have some contrast and see what based on my observations, and then what this book could provide me. I thought it'd be a good learning experience to see what it was. So, but before I tell you more about the book, let me tell you a little bit about the author. So Mr. Albert Lowe, I'm reading his bio from the website albertlowe.ca, and he was a teacher and director of the Montreal Zen Center from 1979 until his passing in January 2016. Albert Lowe was an authorized Zen master, an internationally published author, and a former human resources executive. He wrote 11 books. This is one of them, and he also collaborated in a few others. And well, I'm going to tell you also what I found interesting about the book before I start telling you the key learnings that I got from it. I like the fact that he was using analogies to refer to organizations. He was referring to how organizations are systems, but then systems resemble organisms. But he did make a distinction. Systems are not exactly, they are living entities, of course, but there's a slight difference on how he perceives companies and perceives organisms, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. I also liked the way he transited between the Zen concept and the management concept, and I thought it was a very interesting way because he did it in a very methodical way. So you might think this is a book that is going to be focused specifically on the philosophical aspect of management, and it does have a lot of that, but it is also very technical. And that is actually the next thing that I liked. I like the fact that he does mention the works of some renowned academics such as Ernest Dale, Peter Drucker, and Jill Braid's work. So it's in a way he's speaking about his views, his approaches, but he's also contrasting them with researchers, and that makes it really interesting. And then as I was telling you, I thought this book was going to be some sort of a time capsule, and to my surprise, it was not, because some of the first thing that I read on the book is what he says. And it goes like this: in today's highly regimented, increasingly automated, and deeply impersonal industrial society, the human being who has found fulfilling work is indeed among the blessed. So he got me on that. I did not think that in 1976 people would be struggling with this highly regimented, increasingly automated world. The same way that we are. So in what happens is, the truth is, we are in this ascending road to into learning, discovering new technologies, and creating new avenues and for science, and So I thought it was very interesting that he put it that way. And then he also mentions how unsatisfactory work conditions must have a cost. So companies are he argues that companies need to think or need to consider what is the work environment that they're fostering, because if it's not a good work environment, then that is going to have a toll in the system. And he has a way of mentioning the system, and I will speak about it in just a moment. But he says, if we had that one of the common beliefs is that if we had better managers, life would be more meaningful. So he's not trying to put down managers in any shape or form. Actually, this is a book that it's meant to empower managers, if anything. But so he turns this thought around, and so he says, if we had people think that if we had better managers, life would be meaningful. And then he says, but if we could find our true meaning, we could be better. So rather than expecting to have better managers, so he is giving us that option of becoming better ourselves. And then he goes on to defining what Zen is. So he says Zen is the outcome of the profound need each one of us has for meaning, which can be truly found when we have understood clearly who and what we are. So he expresses the importance of finding meaning at a personal level, but that he turns that company into organizations also need to find meaning. And that is actually part of what he mentions in the basic triad. So I'm going to be telling you about these key points that I thought were really interesting, which are the basic triad, self-realization, the way he describes work, as well as ability. And then finally, I will mention some of the Zen ideas that he shares with us through his book. So he talks about this basic triad concept, and I thought it was very interesting. What he does with this is he tries to tie the Zen principles with the management ones, and he said that a company has this basic triad, which is the shareholder, the employee, and the customer or the market. And rather than being contesting with each other, they're actually supporting each other. And that is what Zen management would do. He would try to balance the interaction between these three driving forces, because if one of them is affected, the other ones are also affected. And it's important for organizations to understand the relationship that exists between the three of them in order to have a more sustainable organization. So he says that in a company which is a multi-dimensional system, which is capable of growth and expansion, and it's also a self-regulating entity, companies are not a thing. Companies are a set of interacting forces and systems. And this system that he talks about, this basic triad, he refers to it because he says the common belief is that if shareholders are not finding what they're looking for, which is profit, then they can withdraw their support, they can withdraw their funds, and then the company would cease to exist. So that is the common belief. So meaning that the shareholder has the sole power to determine the course of a company. But then he says, if an employee would withdraw its input, its contributions to a company, then the company may also cease to exist. And then if we look at the last aspect of the triad, which is the customer, he says if a customer were to withdraw its interest in the company, then guess what? Well, the company would cease to exist. So he says these three driving forces uh, are holding the company together thanks to their commitment. And we need their commitment in order for the company to continue existing. So we need their commitment, but what it means is we need also their investment. So when we talk about this basic triad, shareholders are not the only ones that are investing. So yes, they are investing their money, and through this investment they expect to see their money growth. They expect to see their profits. But if they don't see any result to that end, of course they would withdraw the support. So the employee is investing its capacities, it's expecting to develop its career. If he's not able to find that, then he's gonna go find that somewhere else. But also, if customers don't get what they're expecting, if their needs are not met, uh, they're going to withdraw their investment, they're going to withdraw their support, and they're going to go somewhere else. So the basic triad, it's helping the company, grow, is what makes the company exist. But it exists thanks to their investment, thanks to their commitment. And something that I thought was very interesting is that he argues that they actually exist because this is also a means for self-realization for the three of them: the investors, customers, and employees. There is an urge for self-realization. Each one of them has an urge for self-realization, and companies arise out of the need for self-realization. So for example, he talks about the how the shareholder is self-realizing through his investment in the company, because he's not just looking to make a profit. Yes, that's what is driving him, but he is not just looking to make a profit. He also wants to contribute to a company that is worthy of growth. And then when we look at this from the employee's perspective, well, the employee is not just looking to work at any company. He's not just looking for a higher pay. He's also looking for recognition. He's also looking for challenge and for personal growth. And what is the market looking for? What is the customer looking for? Well, the customer is not just looking for cheap products. The customer also has the need to have pleasing features. So he also wants to see meaning in what he's purchasing with his money. So interestingly, what holds these three things together, these three elements together, is the product. So the product is what holds the whole system together. Growth comes from the balanced interaction of these three forces. And I thought that was very, very interesting. When you look at it that way, then you understand that it does make sense for companies to invest in their employees' well-being, because if they don't do that, then the company will cease to exist. And of course, this is not something that happens immediately, right? But the idea that he's trying to convey is that it is important to make sure to consider what is important for the three of them, for these three aspects within the triad. Actually, he mentions that that is precisely what the role of a president in a company is: to be able to balance the commitment of the three and to be able to provide what they're looking for to the three aspects, not just to the shareholders. And well, that is one of the aspects that I thought was very interesting from the book. And then I'm going to move into another aspect that I thought was relevant to mention, which is the aspect of work. When we talk about companies, of course, we understand that people are going there to perform an activity for which they are expecting a compensation, and that is work. But he says work is not just doing an activity. Work is exercising discretion within limits in order to produce results. And he gives an example in his book that I thought was very illustrating, a very simple example. But he says, when we're talking about work and then we're talking about limits, it's something similar to what we see in a combustion engine. The cylinder are the limits, and the moving piston are the results. If we had if we didn't have the tightness that was necessary to for the gas, or for the steam to move through the cylinder, then we probably wouldn't get the pistons moving. And that is what we need to understand, and that is also one of the understandings, or one of the approaches from Zen practice, is that you also need discipline. So yes, it is important to provide some sort of or a degree of freedom for the employees to exercise their work, but limits are important. And then he provides another example that I thought was also very illustrating. And he says, look at spiders. They build their webs. Nobody tells them how to do it. They do it because this is built in their nervous system, but they do it following a specific pattern. They do it following a specific framework. They're always gonna have an hexagonal shape, and they're always gonna have these threads from which the web is hanging, but and also they're always going to have a gravity center. So there's key elements that are always going to be found there, but you're never going to find two that are alike. They are different. The spider has the discretion to determine what are the best points to hang its web from, and that activity, that discretion that is being exercised, is actually responding to the environment. And that is something similar to what should happen in companies. So there should be an expectation. Yes, there should be limits. There should be goals. There should be objectives. But there should also be a set of rules and methods and structures, so that employees can work within those pre-established set of rules, methods, and structures. But then they can create within those limits. That is, more perfectly the limits are adjusted to the results. The more perfectly the limits are adjusted to the result, the more efficient the operation will be. And then, so when he talks about this, I also like the fact that he not only mentions the activities that are performed, or the functions that are performed in a job. He also talks about budget, for instance, and he says that in organizations there are managers who have to work with implicit and explicit budgets. And what is that? Well, an implicit budget, it's a budget that is not defined. It's a budget that is not clear. It's a budget that he still needs to ask somebody else in order for him to use it. So working this way is not going to give enough clarity to a manager, because he doesn't know how far he can go. So it is as if a manager were working with his eyes closed. So he knows he needs to reach a wall, but he's not going to be sure exactly in what direction he should go, because the limits are not set. He has an implicit budget, but this he doesn't really know how much it is that he has. So that is what he refers to limits. So limits help us also not only perform our work but also prioritize the type of work that we do, and then we can also help other people prioritize their activities or understand what is a priority from what they do, and the objective is to also create value. And then the other aspect that he mentions regarding budget is the explicit budget. So what happens when a manager has an explicit budget? Well, he has clarity regarding how much money, or how many resources he has available for him to use, and only because he knows what he knows what he is capable, what he has an authorization to use, then this gives him clarity. He knows how much he can use, and he is going to prioritize them at his discretion. But then that is the difference between having implicit and explicit budgets, and I thought it was really interesting. He also mentions how value relates to the product that is created, but not only that, it value relates to quality. Quality is the relationship between the parts of the product, between the parts that the product has within itself. That is quality. But value is also linked to the usefulness of the things that we create, and companies should strive for creating value. And then the next thing that I'd like to mention that I really liked was the way he approached ability, or that he referred to ability, and he describes ability as the channel of expression for capacity. So ability is a channel of expression of capacity. If a person is too limited, too restricted, capacity cannot be expressed. So again, so a person may be capable of doing something, but if he's not able to perform the way he needs to, then he's not going to be able to provide a result, or to reach the result that is expected, or the quality or the value that is expected. So I thought it was very interesting to see that aspect, of ability. And I think this this is actually common. Companies are looking, of course, to get the human resources, the best human resources available out there, but then they bring these collaborators into the company, and they're restricted to do what they need to do. So I think this is like I said, this doesn't sound like it's 1976, and that was what was striking for me to see. He also talks about how managers, and this is also something that he mentions, that is part of the Zen practice, because he says, yes, Zen, it is understood as a philosophy, but rather than just being a philosophy, what it really is, it's a practice. So it's not just something that you have to learn, or a set of principles that you need to learn. It's actually something that you do. That is the actual Zen. And he mentions how managers oftentimes have to make decisions between two different courses, between polarity. So he brings the concept of polarity, and he gives some examples, like how sometimes managers have to decide whether they should favor something for the sake of the system, or if they should favor an individual. They have to decide what is urgent, and what is important, or what to do between what's urgent and what's important. They have to decide to or choose for something that has a good or a reasonable cost and quality. So the fact that a manager is facing these dichotomies, that is part of the Zen practice. And actually the objective of the book, as Overlow puts it there, is actually to show or to illustrate how the Zen practices are actually compatible with organizations. And I thought that was also a very interesting thing to think about. He also talks about capacity and structure. So, one of these contrasting concepts that he puts out there in the book is the fact that companies have these two aspects. There's people who work towards structure, rules, regulations, and then there's people who work towards tasks. They're oriented in doing something, creating, achieving, following a set of a sequence of activities. So there's two ways of doing things in organizations. So there's like the administrative work that is not necessarily creating something tangible, but it's also just making sure that structures, regulations are being met. But then there's the other part that is actually creating something from which the product is emanating, as he puts it. And managers have to reconcile these two parts in the company and also understand what each of them needs in order to produce the results that are expected. He also talks about how ideas actually come from the structure. The structural part of the company is the one that works with ideas and concepts, and they put together plans, and then the other part of the company is in charge of executing them and achieving those goals and achieving those creating those products and services. So ideas, what they are is they're there or they exist to reconcile dilemmas. So ideas, they, in order to be valuable, they also need to be useful. And so ideas reconcile dilemmas, and that is from the dilemmas is that products grow. That's where products grow from dilemmas. And then last but not least, before going to the Zen suggestions that he makes, I would also like to talk about how he describes commitment. So earlier I mentioned that commitment is an investment. Depending on how committed you are, that it's the degree of investment that you make in a company, whether you are the shareholder, the employee, or the customer. But then he also says that commitment, it's a focus that provides a precipitating point. Commitment is what helps create, what actually helps creating those products and services. And more importantly, he says that commitment is what enables us to play a role. Because when you're playing a role, you are expected to do certain things, and you do them in the degree that you are committed to the role. So I thought that was a very interesting thing to share. So now I'm going to share with you a few pointers that he provides, some Zen ideas for management. So the first one says, help understand structures within work. If you are a manager, if you are in a leading position, your work is to help people understand the structures within work. If they're not understandable, maybe they need to be reworded, rewritten, and then, or they need to be clear enough, but they need to be understood. People need to know what their boundaries are, again, in order to be able to produce the kind of results that are expected. He also mentions that discipline, it's to act in accordance to these structures. So if you are having trouble with employees being disciplined, it may not be entirely the responsibility of the employee. I know that it's available, but what he argues is it may be an structural issue, a structural problem. So make sure people understand the structures. Make sure that people then act upon those structures. That is the way they illustrate the discipline. And then learn to be liberated so you are capable of doing precisely what is necessary. So he's talking to the manager. Learn to be liberated so you are capable of doing what is necessary. Not what you feel like doing, not what you think other people would like you to do, but precisely what is necessary. So, those are the key learnings that I got from this book and that I thought it'd be nice to share with you. I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And if you are interested in joining me and coming here to share what you learned from a business, marketing, or professional development book, I'll be delighted to do that, to have you here. So I'm going to leave here some information so you can reach me. And thank you very much for joining me. My name is Martha Pineda, and I hope to see you in another edition of Onlibrary Studio. Thank you very much. Goodbye.